What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another chess video series, and in this lesson what I want to do is I want to start going over the London system. Now the London system, I'm guessing a lot of you guys already know this if you're searching for this video, but it's just a really solid opening for white. It has a bunch of benefits, including allow them to have great control over the center. It sets up a really nice pawn structure, and from black's point of view, it's really difficult to get any active play. It's really hard to find a way in to white's camp because it really doesn't have a glaring flaw in it. So just a nice solid opening, and one of the key things that I also love about this opening is that from white's point of view, they get their dark square bishop into the game very early. So a lot of the time with development in other openings, it's hard to get this bishop into the game because it's either blocked by a pawn, or maybe just another piece is in the way, or maybe by the time you decide to develop it, you're already in the middle game and having to defend other pieces. So this system allows you to avoid that by moving it out early, and we're going to see exactly how that works in just a bit. So the way I decided to break this series up is, in this video I just want to show you one of the most popular lines, and it's difficult to choose one line because of course your opponent and not only the person, but the individual game is different every time. So we're going to play a series of moves. Black isn't going to respond the same every time, but in this video I just want to show you some of the most common ones, because no matter what variation they play, the general idea of these lines and the general concepts that we're trying to perform is going to be the same every time. So although they may play different moves, we know the core concept, we know the core structure, and we can respond accordingly. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with our first move, which is always, no matter what black plays or who you're playing against, it's always d4. Now the benefit of this move is pretty obvious. I mean, this is pretty much the same in any d4 opening. It helps control these central squares, namely c5 and e5, attacking those. And another cool thing that it does is it opens up a lane for your dark square bishop, and also gives your queen some options to move out immediately. So again, just a really great opening move, probably the second most popular one, or maybe even the most popular one now, aside from opening with e4. So another common way that black responds to this is just bringing their pawn to d5. Now again, this is essentially just an equalizing move. With this, they are going to be controlling their slice of the center, namely c4 and e4, thus preventing us on the next move from just moving the pawn out to e4. And additionally, like we just did, they open up a lane for their light square bishop and also give their queen some options to move out. Again, this is essentially just an equalizing move. Now our next move is going to be, I don't want to say an uncommon one, but definitely not the most popular one, and that is bringing our dark square bishop out to f4. Now again, like I said, and I don't want to really spoil this, but eventually what we're going to be doing is bringing out our pawn to support this on e3, and if we were to change the move order around where we brought this pawn out first to right here, and our bishop was still locked on c1, then it couldn't move out because it would be blocked by the pawn, of course. So we would either have to move it out this way to b2 and try to get some action like this, but whenever we move it out early, that bishop is now outside the pawn structure on a nice juicy diagonal, and we can continue developing our pawn structure in a little bit more, I don't want to say optimal way, but a different way. So in this line, black is going to respond to our move by bringing his knight out to f6. Now this is a really great move for black because it does a bunch of things. First, of course, it helps move the knight towards the center where it wants to be, where it's most effective, and it also helps defend this d5 pawn right here. And additionally, it helps prepare the king for kingside castling. So now black is just one minor piece away from being able to castle, get their knight to safety, and get their rook into the game into a much better position. So at this point in time, what we're going to want to do is actually just bump our pawn up from e2 to to e3. So what this is going to do is it's going to help protect two pieces at the same time, namely our d4 pawn. Let me highlight that in green, and also our f4 bishop. Now, in addition to just protecting some pieces, what it also does is it opens up a lane for our queen, gives her some more options, and also our light square bishop. And all at the same time, check out this pawn structure that we have with this move. Our kingside pawn structure is now complete. We now have this pawn protecting this pawn protecting this pawn, and all those other benefits as well. So bumping your pawn up from e2 to e3 is just a critical move in London. No matter what other move order you have, this is kind of the core structure that you want for all those benefits I talked about before. So of course, now black has a couple different moves they can do. They can maybe even decide to bring their queen out. They can choose to move their bishop out. Of course, bump out their knight, as you know, many opening lines go, many defenses for black. But one key move that you're going to see a lot is this right here, pawn to c5. Now, at first glance, this looks like kind of a silly move, maybe even a blunder for black, because, I mean, this pawn right here, it's not protected. We can just go ahead and take it with this pawn, but I just want to say that that is not the best move for white. And first of all, if we were to take this pawn on c5 immediately, they could bring out their queen, put our king in check, and then however we defended our king, let's say we moved our queen to d2, they can just go ahead and slide over their queen and attack our pawn right here. And at this point in time, their queen would have some nice radiating power out of the center of the board. Our center, since this pawn would be gone, would essentially be destroyed. And that's essentially the main reason why we don't want to capture right here, because it's almost impossible to hang on to this pawn, and we're essentially giving up our center control for no gain whatsoever. So this is a really great move for black. Again, this isn't the only one that they play, but one of the more popular ones, and that's the general idea behind that. So since we know that we really don't want to take on c5, what we're going to do on the next move is we're just going to bring out our pawn to c3. Now in this, of course, you can see that the main job of this pawn is just to add some more support to our d4 pawn. So then if it captures right here, we can recapture with this pawn, because the e3 pawn, if we capture with that, then we lose control or protection over the f4 bishop. And also it's going to open up a lane for the king, which we really don't want. So at this point in time, if it were to take, we would want to take back with c3, or we could also take back with our queen, another possibility. But aside from that, you see that the move from pawn c2 to c3, it helps complete this awesome pawn structure right here. So we're building up a barrier already with our pawns that is going to make it really difficult for black to find a way in or start attacking these pawns with this nice little barrier right here. And one added benefit is with this move, we're also giving our queen some more options. Now this queen in a lot of variations is actually going to come out in this direction, because this pawn right here, and there are going to be some other weaknesses. Maybe we need to defend this pawn or just decide to attack this pawn later on. But essentially it just opens up some more options for our queen, so it can now move up to the a4 diagonal and also again to the h5 diagonal. Just a really great solid London move. Now a common response from black is to take their knight and move it out to c6. Now this does a couple things. First of all, it adds some more pressure to our d4 pawn, which is going to be a critical point, especially during the attacking phase, the middle game. Now aside from that, it just controls some central squares. It's a very effective point for the knight. And the only other really possible option for the knight to get developed to is just to d7. But if the knight were to be on d7, then it would be blocking some possibilities for the bishop, and also blocking the queen from potentially coming out to the center of the board. So this is really the ideal position in this line for black to develop their knight to. Now in response to this, what we are going to do is we are going to take our knight and move it out to f3. So this is the most common location for the knight in the London system. Again, helping to protect our pawn on d4. And we also have an eye on this square right here, e5. So during the attacking phase of the game, we can use this as an outpost since it is protected by the d4 pawn. And this is just another possibility for attack. And lastly, in doing this, what we're helping is prepare our king for kingside castling. So now we are one bishop move away from allowing our king to castle, and again, just a really great development square for the knight. And in a couple different variations, I'm going to be showing you guys why this may not be the best move, at least at this point in time. But for now, I just want to show you the common setup, like I said. So there you go, knight to f3. So black at some point in this is most likely going to move their pawn out to e6. So with this move, a simple move but a very effective one, they are just helping to defend their pawn on d5, and also in doing this they open up a nice lane for their dark square bishop. So now their dark square bishop can get into the game, and eventually they are going to plan to castle on the king side. So for us, what we're going to do is, okay, it's time to develop our knight right here. So where should it go? Well, the most common square it goes to is c3 right here, but we don't have that available because we moved our pawn there. We can't just chill on top of the pawn. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that knight and bump it out to d2. Now, with the knight being here, it helps develop towards the center, which is always good. It helps defend the other knight, which is a benefit. And later on in the middle game, we do have some ideas of attacking by going to b3 and then c5. So there is an attacking possibility. Again, in this line, d2 is the ideal square for our knight. So now what black is going to do is they're just going to take their bishop and move it to e7. The main idea behind this is, of course, to allow for castling. Another option that they have is moving out to d6, but in that case, they would just be under attack, and it would kind of limit their options. Again, not the worst choice to actually bring this bishop out to d6, but in a lot of the times, they actually just decide to move it out to e7 for those reasons that I just discussed. Now, the last move that I want to talk about is just moving this bishop out to f1 to d3. Now, this is actually a really great move for a bunch of reasons, because in London, this is essentially the ideal position for this bishop. I mean, if you look at the diagonal that it has right now, let me just show you guys this. Look at this attacking power. I mean, it's slicing down the board. It's just radiating out power, and in addition to being developed in an ideal square, what it also allows is for our king to castle on the next move. So that is essentially the core concept, some of the key ideas behind the London. Again, the move order and the different ways that black can respond is different in every single game, but the general idea of it is this. We want to develop in a way where our dark square bishop is outside the pawn structure. We want to have a really nice pawn structure, and as you can see, with this setup, we have a bunch of pieces being developed and also defended, and from black's point of view, it's just really difficult to find the best way to start penetrating our camp. Now from here, both sides are usually going to castle and then maybe a little bit more setup, but essentially we're going to be going into the middle game. And before we get there, in the next couple of videos, I want to show you some different lines that you can play in setting up this opening system. But for now, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time.